Just give me access to your accounts, Dad. I'll take care of everything from now on. My son slid a stack of papers across my kitchen table like he was closing a business deal. Power of attorney, bank authorization forms, a letter from his financial advisor, someone I'd never met, recommending a consolidated family wealth management approach. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at him. He was wearing a sport coat I didn't recognize. New watch. His wife, sitting beside him, was picking at her manicure and not quite meeting my eyes. I said, "Let me read through these tonight." He said, "Of course, Dad. Take your time." But the way he said it, patient, practiced, the way a salesman sounds when he already knows you're going to sign, told me everything I needed to know. That night, after they left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil litigator specializing in elder financial abuse. I've deposed hundreds of people. I've seen this play before. I just never imagined I'd be sitting in the audience watching my own son perform it. His name is Derek. He's 38. His wife is Brianna, and together they have a lifestyle that has always been about 6 months ahead of what they can actually afford. When Derek was young, he was a good kid, earnest, played baseball, did his homework without being asked, called me every Sunday when he was in college. His mother and I were proud of him. When she passed, breast cancer, 11 years ago, Derek was the one who held it together. He made the arrangements. He sat with me in the hospital. He was the son I had raised him to be. Then he married Brianna. I don't blame Brianna for everything. That would be too easy. But I will tell you that before Brianna, Derek drove a 10-year-old Honda and cooked his own dinners. After Brianna, there was a leased BMW in the driveway and a credit card with a limit I found out about only later. They moved to Charlotte 3 years ago for Derek's job. He's in commercial lending. And for a while, things seemed fine. We talked on the phone. I visited twice a year. He seemed happy. Then, 14 months ago, my checking account statement looked wrong. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning. I was going through my mail the way I always do, with a cup of coffee and a legal pad for notes. I'd been doing this every month since I was 26 years old. Old habits. There was an ATM withdrawal from a branch in Charlotte. $540. I had not been to Charlotte. I had not used that ATM. The withdrawal had occurred on a Saturday afternoon when I was in my backyard in Raleigh planting tomatoes. I am a litigator, or I was. The instinct does not retire when you do. I did not call my bank. I did not call Derek. I wrote down the date, the amount, the location, and I waited. The next statement had 2 withdrawals I didn't recognize, one for $490 in Charlotte, one for $350 in Concord, which is right outside Charlotte, both on weekends. Over the following 3 months, I documented 11 unauthorized transactions totaling just over $4,000. He had a copy of my ATM card. I figured that out eventually. 2 years ago, I'd given him a spare in case of emergency. Just in case something happens to you, Dad, I want to be able to help. I had forgotten about it. He had not. I want you to understand what it feels like to sit with that knowledge. It's not anger, not at first. It's something quieter and sadder. It's the moment you realize the person you love has been lying to your face, probably for longer than you know, and smiling while they did it. I thought about my wife. I thought about how she used to say Derek had her eyes in my stubbornness. I thought about how she would have handled this, probably better than me. But I also thought about 31 years of courtrooms, and I decided I was not going to make a single move until I had a case that was airtight. I called my former law partner, a woman named June, who has since moved into estate law. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me you haven't confronted him yet." I hadn't. "Good," she said. "Keep documenting. Don't change anything. If he thinks it's working, he'll keep going." She was right, and she was also not entirely right, because about 6 weeks later the situation became considerably more complicated. I got a call from my homeowner's insurance company. They were following up on a change of contact request. Apparently, all correspondence was now to be sent to a new address, an address in Charlotte. I had not made that request. Then I called my Medicare supplemental insurance carrier. Same thing. A change request had been submitted, redirecting my explanation of benefit statements to an address in Charlotte. Then I looked more carefully at my phone records and found 2 calls to my bank's customer service line that I had not made. They were 40 minutes long. The calls had been made from a number I recognized as Brianna's. My son wasn't just taking money out of an ATM. They were building towards something larger. They were repositioning me, slowly, carefully, so that my financial life was flowing through them. The power of attorney papers on my kitchen table suddenly made a different kind of sense. June called it isolation and redirection. It's one of the most common patterns in elder financial exploitation. The target's communication and financial correspondence gets rerouted. The target gets confused or appears confused, and then one day someone suggests it might be easier if they just handled everything. I had seen this pattern dozens of times from the other side of a deposition table. Here is something I haven't told many people. During those months, I started having trouble sleeping. Not because I was afraid, because I kept trying to find the explanation that wasn't what I knew it was. I kept going back over the timeline, looking for the version where Derek didn't know what Brianna was doing, where he'd been roped into it, where he was a victim too, somehow. I have cross-examined people for 3 decades. I know what evidence means. But this was my son. I have a photograph of Derek on my mantle. He's 8 years old, sitting on a dock in Maine where we used to vacation. He just caught his first fish, a small striped bass that we threw back, and he's holding it up with both hands and grinning so hard you can see his missing front tooth. His mother took that photo. I looked at that photograph a lot during those months. And then I made my decision. I called Derek and told him I was thinking about the papers he brought. I said I was a little overwhelmed. You know how it is, getting older, all this paperwork. And I asked if he could come up to Raleigh to walk me through it. He came the following Saturday, alone. Brianna was visiting her sister, he said. We sat at the kitchen table and he explained everything very gently. The financial advisor, the consolidated accounts, how it would be simpler, how he could handle the bills, the investments, everything. I asked a lot of questions, simple ones that made me sound a little foggy. I misremembered things intentionally. I asked him to explain the same point twice. I watched his face. He didn't look guilty. He looked relieved. I was making it easier for him. That was the hardest part of the whole thing, watching my son look relieved that I seemed confused. I told him I wanted to move slowly. He agreed. I said maybe we could start by adding him to one smaller account, just to get the process going. He agreed to that too, very quickly. June had connected me with a forensic financial investigator, a former IRS criminal investigation agent named Chester, who had done work for our firm over the years. Chester was 63, sharp, and had the energy of someone who finds fraud personally offensive. We set up a secondary checking account with a modest balance. The account was real, the funds were real, but Chester had arranged for any transaction on that account to trigger an immediate notification to both of us. We added Derek as an authorized user. Then I waited. The first transaction happened 9 days later, a $200 withdrawal from an ATM in Charlotte on a Wednesday afternoon, then $350 the following weekend, then $175. Chester was documenting everything in real time. Then something happened that I had not anticipated. I received a call from my accountant, who handles my taxes and my small investment portfolio. He said someone claiming to be my son had called his office, asking about my estimated net worth and the beneficiary designations on my IRA. My accountant had declined to share any information and called me immediately. I thanked him. After I hung up, I sat quietly for about 5 minutes. Then I called June. She said, "It's time." We went to the district attorney's office for Wake County. I brought everything, Bank records, phone records, the insurance redirection documentation, the records from the secondary account, a detailed timeline Chester had prepared, and the written record my accountant had given me about the inquiry regarding my IRA. The assistant DA was a serious young woman who took notes without expression and asked very precise questions. When I finished presenting everything, she looked at her notes for a moment and said, "You mentioned you're a retired civil litigator." I said, "Yes." She said, "This is one of the best documented elder financial abuse cases I'd seen come through this office. Charges were filed: wire fraud, financial exploitation of an elder adult, unauthorized access to financial accounts. Both Derek and Brianna were named. I did not warn Derek. The first he knew was when detectives came to his office. I am told he called my number 17 times that afternoon. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk. I needed a few more hours with the photograph on the mantel, the 8-year-old on the dock in Maine, before I could hear his voice as an adult. His messages started defensive. Then they became confused. By the 5th or 6th message, they became something I wasn't expecting. Genuinely remorseful. Not the practiced remorse of someone who's been caught and is calculating their next move, but something that sounded, and I've listened to enough people under pressure to know the difference, like a man who had just seen himself clearly for the first time in a long time. He said, "Dad, I don't know how to explain what happened to me. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I listened to that message 3 times. Brianna hired an attorney immediately and maintained throughout the process that she'd acted in good faith, that she'd been following Derek's instructions, that she hadn't understood the legal implications. Her attorney was good. It didn't matter. The documentation was what it was. Derek did not fight it. He hired a public defender. They had already drained their savings and maxed 2 credit cards, which I only found out later, and he cooperated fully with the investigation. He made a full accounting of every transaction. The total was $6,340 from my main account and $725 from the secondary account, the bait, over the period Chester had been monitoring. At sentencing, Derek spoke. I was in the courtroom. He didn't look at me the whole time. He spoke to the judge. He talked about his mother dying and feeling like he was drowning financially and telling himself he would pay it back, and the way something in him had just stopped working right. He talked about Brianna and took responsibility for his own choices while not blaming her entirely. He talked about the photograph on my mantel, which he knew I kept there, and he cried. I did not cry in the courtroom. I have a professional habit of not crying in courtrooms. I cried in my car afterward for about 20 minutes. Derek received 3 years probation, community service, and full restitution. He was required to surrender his NMLS license. He will not work in banking or lending again. Brianna received probation and restitution. Their marriage did not survive the year. Here is what I want to tell you, because this is the part the legal documents don't capture. 2 months after sentencing, Derek drove up from Charlotte. He didn't call ahead. He knocked on my door on a Sunday morning, and I opened it, and he was standing there with no plan and no speech prepared as far as I could tell. He looked thinner, tired. He said, "I don't know if you want to see me." I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I said, "Come inside. I'll make coffee." We sat at the same kitchen table where he had slid those papers across to me. We sat there for 4 hours. I did not tell him that I forgave him. That's not something you say, and then it's done. But I told him that I was his father, and that was not a temporary condition, and that I was willing to do the work if he was. He cried again. He's not the stoic type, never was, even as a kid. His mother always said he felt things very deeply, which was a gift and also sometimes a vulnerability. He is in therapy now. He is living in a small apartment in Raleigh, 2 miles from my house. He is working in construction management, which has nothing to do with finance, and which he says he likes more than he expected. We have dinner on Thursdays. People ask me sometimes, friends, former colleagues who know the story, whether I regret how I handled it, whether I wish I had confronted Derek privately first, handled it within the family, avoided the criminal process. Honestly, no. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I have spent 31 years watching what happens when financial exploitation of elders goes unaddressed. I have seen families that covered it up, told themselves it was a misunderstanding, let it continue until there was nothing left. I have seen people lose their homes. I have seen people die in reduced circumstances because their children spent their security. I am 67 years old. My wife is gone. The money I have is what allows me to remain in my own home, make my own choices, live with dignity. Anyone who takes that for any reason needs to understand that there are consequences. If I had accepted those papers and handed over access to my accounts, I would have lost much more than money. I would have spent whatever years I have left dependent on people who had already demonstrated they did not have my interests at heart. I made different choices. The photograph is still on the mantel. The 8-year-old on the dock in Maine, holding the fish with both hands, missing front tooth. I have not taken it down. I have put a second photograph next to it. It's from a few months ago. Derek and I at a cookout in my backyard. He's grilling. He looks tired in the way that people look when they're doing the actual work of rebuilding something, but he's smiling. He has his mother's eyes. That part didn't change. If you are watching this and something about this story sounds familiar, if someone close to you has started redirecting your mail, asking about your accounts, suggesting they should handle things on your behalf, please don't wait until you're certain. Document everything quietly. Call your bank, call an attorney, and remember, protecting yourself is not a betrayal. Letting yourself be exploited is not love. I learned that. I wish I had learned it some other way, but I'll take it. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. I read every one of them, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it. Take care of yourselves out there. I've had a long time to think about what actually went wrong with Derek. Not the legal part that I understood completely. I'd spent 3 decades inside that machinery. I mean the human part. The part where a kid I raised, to be honest, looked me in the eye across my own kitchen table and handed me papers designed to take everything I had. Here's what I've come to believe. People don't usually make one catastrophic choice. They make 100 small ones, each one a little easier than the last because the previous one went unpunished. Derek didn't wake up one morning and decide to steal from his father. He made a small choice first, probably told himself it was temporary, probably told himself he'd put it back. Then he made another. And then the choices started making him instead of the other way around. That's how character actually works, in my experience. It's not who you are on your best day. It's who you become across all the ordinary days when no one's checking and the temptation is right there and the justification is easy to find. Derek found his justifications. Brianna helped him find more. And the version of himself he built back when he was 8 years old on a dock in Maine, that kid who returned the fish to the water because it was the right thing to do, that version got buried under a BMW lease and a lifestyle that needed feeding. I don't say that to excuse him. I say it because understanding how something happens is the only way to prevent it from happening again. What I had to reckon with, and this took time, more time than I expected, was my own role in it. Not in the theft. That was Derek's choice and Brianna's choice, and I own none of it. But in the years before that, I had not asked hard enough questions. I had seen the signs of financial overextension and told myself it wasn't my business. I had given him that ATM card and not thought carefully about what I was handing over. I had been so relieved that Derek seemed fine after losing his mother that I had stopped looking closely at whether he actually was. Wisdom isn't knowing everything in advance. Wisdom is being honest about what you chose not to see and deciding you won't make that choice again. The thing about working in elder financial abuse law for as long as I did is that you develop a very clear picture of what dignity costs. It costs vigilance. It costs the willingness to have uncomfortable conversations. It costs accepting that love for someone does not require making yourself vulnerable to them. I told juries that for years, then I had to tell it to myself. What gave me the strength to do what I did, to document quietly, to wait, to build the case, to walk into that DA's office, was not anger. Anger fades. What doesn't fade is the understanding that you have one life and you owe it to yourself to protect it with the same care you'd give anyone else you loved. Derek is rebuilding. I watch him on Thursday evenings across my kitchen table, and I can see it's real work, not performance. That matters to me. But I'll tell you honestly, even if he hadn't come back, even if the relationship had ended entirely, I would still have done the same thing, because protecting yourself is not a failure of love. Sometimes it is the most important thing love requires you to do.